Intel releases the first commercial microprocessor in the world, the Intel 4004, for $60. Today's money, $430. This ushered in a new age of electronic development, the first general-purpose computer, and a shepherd to the new era. There's sparsely an end user who doesn't know how to write software. Computing is simply too expensive of a tool to not use in a commercial setting. And because of the technical barrier and the obscurity of the field, there's little demand for software to non-enterprise users. The consumer market is effectively priced out of major releases. As early as the first 5 years into the birth of computing, there is already a piracy scene. The average computer costs $400 to $600. The first ever record of piracy is Bill Gates addressing the lack of royalties he and his partner, Paul Allen, are getting from their port of BASIC to the Altair computer system. The letter describes the theft of their software as a major contributing factor to their lack of financial success. He notes that at the current rate of sale, they are making less than $2 an hour. In May of 1977, the new up-and-comer on the PC market released their newest computing platform, the Apple II. It's on the cutting edge of personal computers. An 8-bit microprocessor, 4 kilobytes of RAM, an option between an audio cassette deck, a floppy disk reader, and color graphics. All this for only $1,298. While it was a dud within its first year of sale, the computing world would collectively sing their praises and shell out the minor payday loan required to buy it by the end of 1980. There you are, with your shiny new stack of beige rectangles, basking in the glory of its pallid shell, contrasting the rainbows of pixels on the display. The operating system loads. Now all you need is software. You frantically grab the nearest magazine and flip through the pages to peruse the software advertisements until you can find what you need. You need another loan. A college friend interns at IBM. You figure he has some of this software. Landlines ring, and he hooks you up with office writing software, spreadsheet programs, graphics demos, a couple games from his personal collection, and blank floppy disks. He wants the originals back in a week. So, you get to copying. While software around this time would not bar an individual from creating infinite copies of a cassette, physics did. Copying cassettes is a lossy process, meaning that as you copy, you don't get an exact copy of the original. It'll have minor issues here and there, but it's usable most of the time. From now, inferior versions will do. The first BBS systems come online. BBS was an early version of internet sites that would connect via phone line. These sites would only be able to have 5 to 10 concurrent connections, and 14 to 56 kilobytes a second download speed. For those unfamiliar with download speeds, in the best case scenario, this 2K version of the Windows Bliss wallpaper would take over half a minute to download, and a standard film would take over 9 hours to download. The majority of BBS sites are used to converse and post about niche interests. These interests included shareware groups who would distribute already free software, as well as pirate groups who would distribute copyrighted material without authorization. Soon, pirates open up BBSs specifically for pirating. These are mostly separated by format. As the modem world expanded, demand for system operators for BBSs exploded. Pirates began to host their own collections, and some took the step to paywall access to it. For fees up to $70 a month, pirate site operators saw fit to seek profit while they could, leaning on the local scale of BBS sites and paywall barrier to stay under the radar of copyright enforcement groups. From here, the piracy scene was split into 2 categories: the general piracy scene most are familiar with, and within, the more secretive and elusive wares scene. The open piracy scene will often get material from the wares scene, though the wares scene is the progenitor of all of its own material. For brevity, I'll be referring to both as the wares or piracy scenes interchangeably, but our focus here and the general subject is the more secret wares scene. Now that copyright infringement was able to be done over hundreds and hundreds of miles, rights holders realized that there was no longer a possibility to ignore the spread of their material. Software publishers got to work on creating on-disk software copy protection to combat the spread of unauthorized distribution of their products. Copy protection existed at this point in the form of checksums. A checksum, simply put, would take all the code for the original program and will generate a string. If anything in the code changes, even one letter, so will the checksum. On starting a program, it will check to see if the checksum has changed at all from its expected form. If it has, the program will refuse to boot. Unfortunately for developers, even for the time, this form of copy protection was very primitive and could be broken in a matter of minutes. Those with even less sophistication in their software engineer departments would take advantage of the slow speed of phone line networks and load their programs with junk files to discourage downloading. While in the short term, this type of copy protection was effective, storage space and bandwidth were rapidly increasing. But for a small subsect of the computing market, they took this step as an infringement of their right to use their purchased software as they'd like. This would be an opportunity to dedicate themselves to freeing their own and others' software from the shackles of arbitrary restriction. Computer software and storage were actively moving away from the audio cassette format and into the first widespread digital format, the floppy disk. Floppy disks came with more storage, faster transfer speeds, and had plenty of potential to grow as a format. It did come with a downside though. The degradation cassettes suffer after copying is no longer present. You're now able to copy from your retail disk and no longer need a master to copy from. Often starting as one-man operations, crackers would release a game here or there that would catch their personal interest. They would connect with other crackers via BBS sites after releases. Talking in chat rooms eventually became collaborations, and with collaborations brought organized teams. Copyright law codified the state of software as intellectual property by amending the 1976 Copyright Act via the Computer Software Copyright Act of 1980. In 1981, distributing software you didn't create for free would now cost you $150,000 per work infringed, plus legal fees. Now, software companies officially had legal recourse to fight against the rampant piracy and bootlegging operations that permeated the market. Again, those willing to bypass the restrictions set by the software publishers shrank, and the resolve of those willing to break those restrictions grew. While on paper software rights holders now had legal recourse, the deterrent was ineffective at curbing online sharing of software. The PC market was in a time of incredible growth. When one cracker dropped out, 5 more would take his place. Compared to physical bootlegs, online piracy was not a priority for the federal government yet, and if the infringing party was out of the United States, it wasn't the government's problem. Effectively, nothing changed for the average pirate. For uploaders, if you were caught, you'd get hit with a civil suit, and for downloaders, your phone would likely get cut by your telecom company. But as for smaller software companies that didn't have the money or resolve to stick it through court proceedings, they were out of luck. With current archives, the earliest records of piracy we have is a text file from 1983, instructing users on how to break the copy protection of SPOC, the Chess Master, and Galaxian, a Space Invader clone which was cracked by the Coyote Kid. It's not clear which came first, as the SPOC crack is dated, but the Galaxian crack is not. The federal government held a hearing with media industry giants, many of whom advocated the entry of the United States into the Berne Convention. The Berne Convention heightened responsibility and enforcement standards for the protection of copyrighted work, as well as creating international cooperation for investigations into copyright infringement. Testimony included statements from Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Bo Goldman, and a representative from IBM, Kenneth Dam, all of which endorsed the passing of the Berne Implementation Act. It wasn't an unreasonable ask for the movie companies, as they would have reels ripped and bootlegged from legitimate theaters and rescreened within unauthorized establishments. These bootlegged copies would also often be inferior versions of the original reels. They had defects ranging from improperly cropped scenes to sections cut to shorten the runtime. IBM's representative testified that at this time, IBM was losing $800 million annually due to piracy. A cracking group known as the Humble Guys forms in early 1989. While many other groups were run by part-time crackers and pirates, THG had release volume, and they were ruthless promoters. Their popularization was largely thanks to the use of advertising every release as a THG release through NFO files packaged with cracked software. Flashy graphics introducing the viewer to the world of THG. The term crackdros was coined to specify this type of advertising. THG were highly organized and set the standard for piracy groups. On time, frequently early, and reliable delivery of copyrighted software. THG were also the first to organize a robust force for spreading their releases across multiple piracy boards and sites. While THG referred to them as slaves, within the scene they were known as couriers. With this new development, there became a formalized structure to these previously formless groups. Visualize a pyramid. At the top of this pyramid are crackers, those who are able to rip the files and dissect the copy protection in order to strip it out. Those who crack programs tend to be the most technically skilled and highest ranking of the group. Often they are considered the only irreplaceable members of their respective group. Second on the pyramid are site admins, who run the sites that host the actual end content and generally take the brunt of legal repercussions. Along with having to deal with the fallout of police action, they also design and run the majority of operational security for their site and IRC servers. Being the most legally culpable for directly hosting the copyright infringing material, they take the most risk being active in the scene at all. On the layer below we have suppliers, those within the distribution chain of big releases and will leak it to cracking groups early so they can crack and release it before or during the product launch. These people are typically valued within wares groups depending on the value of their full-time employer. Taking the most risk out of their peers, they're typically showered with scene access and private boards as thanks for their contribution. Nukers are the moderators of the wares world. Their main job is removing duplicate uploads and nuking policy violators. Enforcing the rules of a criminal world may seem contradictory, owed to the fact that being in the scene at all predicates that you break the law in some capacity. However, the leaked sites use the rules to create a base minimum standard of quality and readability. Often these sites' rules would seem contradictory to a pirate ethos. For example, you can be nuked for stealing another group's release, having an incorrect release name, having a release that does not correctly patch the executable, going over the disk space limit, using aggressive lossy compression, uploading third-party level packs for games, starting a flame war, uploading a game over 6 months old, and many more depending on the site it is uploaded to. The last and most expendable portion of the scene are couriers. This section of the scene is generally less technically skilled. Their role is to run to every site their group is affiliated with and upload and trade releases. Their enrollment in the group is conditional on the amount of times they spread a release, having to meet a minimum quota just to be a part of the group. That is not to say that there is no glory in being a courier. Being the best of the best as a courier would catch you some recognition in scene newsletters. Often, these files would chart the top couriers of the week on a leaderboard, and having your name consistently top these charts would net some much desired association with more prestigious groups. Naturally, the scene isn't this simple. A sizable portion of the community would work for multiple groups, have multiple roles, or even work in roles outside of this general outline. In fact, another role exists within every layer of this pyramid: the artist. Those within the wares scene also have quite a bit of overlap with the demo scene. The demo scene is a subculture of computer art that creates small, beautiful executable programs synced to music. Some of the biggest cracking groups have veterans of the demo scene within their highest ranks. The Fairlight Cracking Group was famous for their demos within the wares and demo scene. There's definitely a distinction to be made between wares scene art and demo scene art. The wares scene art tends to be antagonistic to society, to copyright, and to themselves. Many pieces of art within the scene demean their own characters, or even groups of characters. It's juvenile, demeaning, and not very appealing to the average sensibilities. That's part of the point. to turn away normal people with abrasive slogans and images. It's specifically made to not be for you. Despite the abrasive skin, any serious wares group has aesthetics at the top of their priority list. To create intoxicating designs to draw the end user into the brand. For many, it'll be the first exposure they have to these groups. And creating a lasting impression is key to success in the pirates world. The spectacle itself also creates a level of prestige. Fairlight became one of the largest examples, with their aesthetic, both the abrasiveness and the technical ability being something to marvel at, and it very much contributed to their prestige. It wouldn't be a shock to become aware that the Fairlight Group did not get their origin within the piracy scene, but in the aforementioned demo scene. Despite the initial popularity of THG, their tenure as a cracking group was relatively short-lived, as their de facto leader, Bulgarian, had left. To quote a scene-exclusive newsletter, the SCD Report, even though THG still exists, it does not hold its past glory. Its golden age has ended. The descent of THG began when Bulgarian, one of their most important members, had decided to quit the many hazards of the modem world. Bulgarian had done most, if not all, of THG's organization. After THG lost Bulgarian, the members started to slack off bit by bit, some of them becoming all talk. They sat back and did nothing to contribute to their group. This rise and fall pattern is typically the rule for the wares scene. The pirates world is a fast one. There's hardly a group that's been spared irrelevance aside from a rare few, whether by simple loss of interest or law enforcement interference. Bruce Esquibel is awakened by a knock at his door. He's slow to get out of bed, but answers. In his yard are 5 Secret Service agents presenting 2 search warrants, one for his home and one for the address his BBS site operated out of. He isn't particularly surprised by this. While the content of his public BBS wasn't illegal, to his knowledge, he kept a lax approach to moderation and had already figured that someone could post something to get the authorities involved before he had time to moderate it. May we come in? Sure. His mind wandered as 3 of the Secret Service agents walked through, thinking of any specific file, if any, he could recall that would be any kind of illegal. The 2 remaining agents asked Bruce to come with them into the car, to which he obliges. While Esquibel had not been running an illegal operation, or hosting illegal files, or aiding criminals in either of those 2 tasks, the piracy scene got a message. Computer crimes are on their radar now. There's no longer a security by obscurity inherent within computing circles. News spread immediately about the raid on private forums, public IRC, and other BBS sites. Months of speculation and rumor eventually ended with a seizure warrant being posted publicly after the investigation into Ripco closed. Some were rattled by the foreboding events, though most were bolstered by the lack of arrests and prosecution, and decided to push further into their cracking efforts. Operation Sun Devil was the first nationwide bust of criminal computer activities, but the lack of any real consequence for the pursued parties was bad PR for law enforcement. The officers working the cases mostly had little idea of what crimes were being committed, and had struggled to grasp basic computing concepts. Esquibel recalled in a write-up later in the year. These questions were general in nature, and read off a Xerox sheet, mostly a list of phrases that were looking for definitions. What is a phreaker, hacker, know what a virus is, have you ever written or distributed one, etc. One fact that arose well into our chats is that it became obvious that besides Tim, who seemed to know little besides a few buzzwords, none of those really had an understanding of computers, or much else as far as the technical background went. Another agent even admitted later that they were only here to serve the warrant. As far as what was really going on with the investigation, and who or what was involved, They didn't know. Escobel was never charged with any crime, so the feds went back to the drawing board and waited for their next opportunity to infiltrate. Russian hacker Jimmy James and his friend Cyber Angel founded the Drink or Die Wares group. They work initially on small software releases from Russia and neighboring countries, releasing cracked versions and cheats periodically. They were aware releasing stuff like this was barely going to be a blip on the radar. They knew they had to release something big to get the DoD name out into the limelight. But in just over a year and a half, they spotted their opportunity. Bill is once again burned by the pirates, and Drink or Die releases Windows 95 for free 2 weeks before the official launch. With the support of the BSA and the SPA, Congress passes the No Electronic Theft Act of 1997, which made it illegal to download software. And a year later, Congress passes the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which made it illegal to bypass copyright restrictions. Napster is created. Immediately, the BitTorrent protocol explodes in popularity, as does piracy in general. This year, total music industry revenue caps out at $23.8 billion. By 2014, it will sink to $14.3 billion. That's almost 40% in 15 years.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
Napster gets sued by Metallica and peaks at 26.4 million users, with piracy reaching a new epoch by being made available to the wider internet. Even more pressure was mounting from the record and software companies to do something about the now extremely rampant problem. International authorities struck into the online world with a flurry of new busts. Since 1997, US and international authorities had been lying in wait, running scrapers of popular Wares chat rooms, waiting in secret, and saving every single word sent. These logs would be analyzed to de-anonymize key sceners and obtain arrest warrants and seizure warrants. This current operation covered a wider range of internet crime, but specifically targeted large Wares groups, namely Drink or Die and Razor 1911. Razor 1911 for their general prominence, and Drink or Die for their infamous Windows 95 leak. Operation Buccaneer executed 70 simultaneous search warrants in 6 countries. 23 were arrested. Countless drives, CDs, and computers were seized. And worst of all, the scene's pride was shaken. This was their first direct blow and major ego hit. The Pirate Bay opens. Authorities execute Operation Fastlink. Operation Fastlink was more focused on the game and movie piracy scene, and they primarily targeted European-based groups like Fairlight. US and Dutch agents raided 20 universities in the Netherlands and the US, and executed more than 120 search warrants across the world. These raids took down multiple top sites and an entire archive belonging to the Callisto Group. Along with this blow, several key members of the Fairlight Group were arrested, all of whom faced sentences ranging from 10 to 15 years. This was the first real knockout blow to the world of the piracy scene, and it was also the first anti-piracy bust that was bankrolled by software publishing lobbies, which contributed to the widespread nature of the operation. 8 months later, Fairlight fully concludes their cracking operations after one last release. Fairlight released a statement announcing the shutdown. You all read the news. Operation Fastlink struck hard to the heart of the scene and hit the Fairlight ISO section. But mind that the demo activities on the PC and C64 are still naturally untouched, as there is nothing to complain about from a legal point of view on what they are doing. So, let me underline it for you again. Fairlight's ISO section is lethally wounded, but the group as such is still alive and kicking. Fairlight is built stronger to last longer. Fairlight is bigger than one and even all of the sections. Fairlight is, and you can rely on the fact that Fairlight will continue to be, Respects to the Fastlink people for finding the core of the scene, which is not an easy thing to do. They're doing their job, and we're not whining. In war, people take bullets. We are aware of this. If you can't stand the sight of body bags, then stand back and let the real men do the work for you. People tend to think that there will always be another cracker, and that getting games early is a star quality here. It's not. Protections of today are ones that very few can penetrate, and those who do should be worthy of respect. Downloading them fast is just a matter of a fast lane in combination to access to a site. Skills stay, whereas access can be revoked instantly. We do it for the thrill, joy, and the fans. But don't take us for granted without showing justified respect. At the time of the raids, Fairlight was one of the oldest surviving cracking groups. More of a fixture than a common fleeting group, the takedown of Fairlight was devastating for morale. Within a year, the FBI and other law enforcement agencies were determined to dismantle the core of the scene with Operation Sight Down. More raids, primarily in the United States, specifically targeting site operators and crackers for maximum effect. To do this, they create 2 of their own Where sites and partner with cracking groups for releases. Despite the best efforts of law enforcement, an observable cycle emerges. Where's groups crack and release material. Law enforcement raids a small portion of groups cracking this material. The Where scene slows down, then recuperates and goes back to cracking and releasing copyrighted material, often at a higher volume than before. Operation D-Elite was a raid that was actually outside of the Where's scene and was the first to target peer-to-peer distributors. Despite the efforts of law enforcement, the rates of piracy were only going up. The popularization of peer-to-peer file distribution expanded piracy by orders of magnitude. Peer-to-peer files cut the need for storage space into a fraction of what was required before, by sourcing bits and pieces of the whole file from everyone who's downloaded it. So now you wouldn't need multiple terabytes of storage on a server you run to host a decent-sized collection. The piracy world adapted once again to the mounting pressure from the lobbying and law enforcement efforts to come out more resistant to their tactics. By this point, the piracy community became somewhat of a social movement, in the vein of punk's anti-authority ideals with a digital slant. Raiding mostly computer hobbyist college kids to protect the interests of multi-billion-dollar entertainment and software publishing companies caused some amount of disillusionment within the average person. Beginning in Sweden, the home of the Pirate Bay, people started to do something about it and created the Pirate Party. Within the first 2 days of its existence, the website for the Pirate Party reached 2 million visitors. It's around this time that it was recorded that piracy accounted for 35% of all internet traffic. The same year, the US establishes its own Pirate Party, with the stated goal of abolishing the DMCA. On May 31st, the Pirate Bay servers are confiscated by Swedish police. In October, Fairlight returns to the cracking scene. Pirate Bay goes to trial and is convicted of accessory to copyright infringement. Because of this verdict, the Swedish Pirate Party expands to over 40,000 members. The next day, over 1,000 protesters take to the streets. On parliamentary election day, the Pirate Party got 7.1% of the vote and won a seat in European Parliament. Piracy suffers a fuller defeat than anything that has come before, via streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, and Hulu. By 2015, piracy will plummet to 6% of all internet traffic, down from their peak during the mid-2000s. While no research has been done about the exact reason, majority consensus is that while piracy has the benefit of being free, streaming services were easier to use and were guaranteed to not have any suspicious attachments come along with them. Overall, if the price is right, people are generally content to pay for media provided it's an easy-to-use service. While there were police and law enforcement busts during this time, none were on the level of anything that had come before. The lull in piracy brought in a lull for busts. For a time, it seemed that the government and lobbying groups had taken the hint that a reasonable service and costs were enough to curb illegal uploading and downloading for the majority of cases. But within the scene, something strange had happened. One of the new top scene release groups had a member suddenly retire. Then another prominent scene member simply went offline. In August of 2020, the US unsealed indictments on several release groups, including Sparks, Geckos, Drones, Rovers, and Sprinter. Panic spread throughout the scene. 14 years without a major scene raid gave them a sense of invincibility. On Wednesday, August 19th, there were 1,944 new releases. A day after the raids, there were 168 new releases. IRC chat rooms and top sites were set ablaze. Everything was locked down, and for seemingly the first time, however briefly, the wind was taken out of their ship's sail. They weren't gone, but now they were lost at sea. The scene is far from dead. Arguably, it's impossible to kill them. Even if they busted half of all top sites, there would still be the groups and individuals who would live for the challenge of breaking security. As a matter of fact, piracy is on the rise as of late. While there's definitely a case to be made that correlation doesn't equal causation, etc., etc., I believe this is fairly obvious, that this is entirely because there are simply too many streaming services. There's no longer a deal that was as good as Netflix used to offer. Hundreds of movies and shows, on demand, and at a reasonable price, consolidated into one place. So what can we take away from this decades-long battle between copyright enforcers and crack addicts? I would argue that copyright law in its current form is virtually unenforceable. Copyright protection will never keep away a dedicated pirate, and there always will be one. And that cost, while a factor, will not be the only reason one pirates. Predicting the future is betting against God. I'm fairly confident when I say I think piracy will only grow. The proliferation of a streaming service per movie studio now makes it a hassle for the average person to watch two separate movies if they were made by different studios. Internet streaming services are now marginally better than cable services for TV, but with the direction that the media industry is going, it looks like that will no longer be the case within 5 to 10 years. Copyright enforcement, no matter how much is used, will be ineffective at actually stopping pirates short of creating a new great firewall.
I got this stuff from the aliens. It goes so hard, I can feel my lungs. They turn it black and blue, I am suffocating. I just smoke too much weed, I am going dumb. Smoke too much weed, I watch it drinking more time. Cause I'm so stupid and I can't feel my brain. Cause I just smoked so much weed with the aliens. They just gave me rockets from outer space. Rolling up some blunts and I'm rolling up some joints. Took a hit from the bong, I can't feel it in my lungs.